Hi, I'm Graham Harvey. I'm the Professor of Religious Studies at the Open University.
I'm Dr. Stephanie Lay. I've got a PhD in cognitive psychology.
And I'm Dr. Alison Robertson, and I've got a PhD in religious studies.
So, because it's Halloween, we thought we'd have a chat about, first of all, the origins of Halloween, and then talk about fear and loathing and all those stuff that goes on
Las Vegas.
through the night. It's not Las Vegas,
Sorry.
perhaps, a loathsome place. So, one of the things that interests me about Halloween is that its origins as a festival in which Christians celebrated their dead, the ancestors, the souls, the saints, and it was a very positive thing. Okay, so it's tied into change of the season, the beginning of winter, and older pre-Christian festivals like the Irish Samhain, which is a turn of the seasons, the beginning of the dark winter side of the year. But now we tend to think of Halloween as being a fearful time, and the dead are dangerous people rather than great grandma who hopefully is looking after us rather than trying to frighten us. So I'm kind of intrigued by how the fear thing came in rather than our celebration of the dead and our community with them.
I think that's really interesting, and I think we've seen quite a lot of changes in our culture around fear and what it is that actually does disturb us as human beings. And this is where my research has started to look at this, because I'm particularly interested in the things that are almost human but not quite human. So my typical things are robots, zombies, creepy clowns, that kind of thing. And
So how are robots and zombies connected?
They're both things that are almost but not quite human.
Okay.
So with the robots, what happened over time was people tried to make them more human-like, thinking that would actually make them more likeable, more friendly. And then you hit this real pit where all of a sudden those human-like characteristics become so close to human that they become off-putting, and you throw yourself into repulsion.
But you see, what that makes me think of, there's another shift that's almost happening now as we speak in popular culture, in that things like vampires and werewolves and zombies, the sort of traditional scary things, people are kind of reclaiming those, and you get your Twilight vampires who are vegetarian vampires and all of that sort of thing. But robots, people are still terrified of robots.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you see getting a shift in what people are afraid of.
Do you think that's an animistic thing?
Well, I wonder if it is connected to your kind of research, actually, because if, the legend of the vampire, they start off human and then they get this additional thing, but they're still human. Same with werewolves, same with zombies, whereas robots have never been human.
So we're putting something extra into them rather than taking
Yeah, and
something
I wonder
away.
if that feeds the uncanniness and feeds the fear, because if it has been human, then you know something about it, don't you? On some level or another, you have something in common.
Well,
Whereas if it's never been human, it's only got what it was given. If it's never been given things you understand.
But you also might be afraid that you might one day become one of those.
True.
Other than human, like the zombie, you might be trapped. So you're not going to rest and be dead, whereas robots, well, I suppose you could become a cyborg, but...
I think with robots it's a slightly different fear, because it's the fear that this could replace your animacy, your humanness, and the fact that you have an individual personality of your own.
Because it's similar. I mean, vampires are a useful legend to use for this. So vampires are human plus something. They're better than human beings because they're stronger, because they've got hypnotic powers, all the various things vampire legends have. But robots are that too. Robots are humans plus something.
Yeah.
Some of the television and film that explores robots and artificial intelligence, it explores exactly that idea. I'm thinking about Humans, which was a Channel 4 series, and you've got young people in that sort of teenagers, adolescents coming up to leaving school and saying, well, what am I going to do? Because we've got these synthetic people who can do everything, I don't have to do anything. I can't do anything.
There's no space
Because
for
they
me
are,
to move into.
exactly,
Yeah.
and that's a different kind of fear, isn't it? It's not it's going to kill me and eat me. It's a different kind
It's
of
going
fear.
to push me out. It's going to sap my
There'll
humanity.
be no place left for me.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I've been looking into, is how we could relate to these entities if they're living in our homes. So I've done quite a bit of work talking to people about how they would feel having an artificial agent as a presence in their home. And it's quite surprising, the split that you get by demographics. A lot of older people who you would expect to eventually be supported by these robot entities absolutely reject the idea. It's mainly the younger people who are more comfortable with technology, possibly more comfortable seeing it as an appliance rather than a person that would be comfortable with
They
that.
use them in Japan though, don't they? And they're
Helper robots,
animal, but they're
a huge
animal
amount.
shaped. I'm sure there are companion ones. I'm sure I
Oh,
saw
there's
something about it online
like
recently.
a
A
little
little
seal,
companion
a parrot.
stroke. That's the one.
That's him. Yeah.
It looks nothing like a person at all.
No, they've
But it
deliberately
still
gone
gives
for
you that
something.
companion.
Yeah, and it also
There's a different dynamic as well here, which is the old Halloween scare things that you want to keep these beings away. You don't want to let them across the threshold. So there's all these sort of banishing rituals, people wearing amulets or putting salt around to keep them away. Whereas you're talking about beings who are not human or more than human perhaps, being brought in. So there's a very different dynamic to
that's
that kind
fascinating,
of,
isn't it? That threshold
away from
element
us.
to it.
But isn't it still, I mean, isn't it, or at least part of that, couldn't it still be this cultural shift in progress thing? Because a lot of people nowadays, they're not keeping these things out, they're dressing up as them, they want to be them, and for a lot of people that's not even just confined to Halloween. You know, if you look at goth forums online and goth blogs and things like that, there's all sorts of memes going, yes, Halloween, the time when I can stock up for the rest of the year on all the things that I like. You know,
It's the
that
only
sort
time I
of
can
thing.
go shopping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I collect brooches is one of the things I do. This is a Halloween brooch officially, but I will wear it all year. And there's all sorts of discussions going on at the moment in various social networks about this. All these designers bringing out Halloween collections. Why are they bringing them out when I can only wear them one day a year? And then other people going, well, I'm going to wear it all the time. What are you talking about? And I think it's a shift. There's a shift in what frightens us and what we find appealing. And I think the sort of traditional demons, in inverted commas, we've started to find those more appealing because, you know, eternal youth, strength, all those sorts of things. And you get the popular fiction that gives them a soul as opposed to taking it away. You know, that's quite a common thing to do with vampires these days, is you give them a soul and you say, well, they're tortured by their evil nature. But that adds to the appeal for an ordinary person to go, well, you know, I could be a vampire, I'd be a good vampire.
Yes.
We're afraid of other things and we try to keep other things out.
Do you think that is because
It's a shift in progress, isn't
we
it?
have so many big rational fears in society at the moment that it's almost comforting to find those things that used to scare us and almost
Well, I
cling
wonder,
on to that?
because I was reading something recently about how interesting it was that the sort of origins of the Gothic are way back in Dracula and Frankenstein and all those sorts of legends, and that other things that people were afraid of then we're not afraid of now. Why are we still afraid of the living dead and the, you know?
Right.
And maybe it is connected to genuine rational fear, I don't know.
So, and then the other shift that you've hinted at there is to do with the sort of the dressing up and the doing of strange and wonderful things, excess. That there are these times of the year. Now we are going back to a kind of early Christian or pre-Christian way of celebrating the year, and we're finding moments in the calendar which we can mark, so every day is not the same. I mean, it's unfortunate then that Halloween and Christmas begin in September or something, and the shops are already full of stuff for so long. But it does give us this moment, these times where we structure the year and we dress up, we play, and we regain a sense of the importance of doing rituals that are very kind of unusual in the last several hundred years, 500 years of Protestant Christian Europe.
But that, I mean, that makes me think. Halloween's got more and more popular. I mean, when I was a kid, Halloween was relatively low key. It's got more and more popular in recent years, and so has the rejection of traditional religion, certainly in British society, got more and more popular. And it'd be really interesting to think there was a
where that
connection between those two
crossover,
things. Well,
yeah.
I'm not putting traditional religion here, but I still have a need to do these things, as I think everyone has a need to do those things. And Halloween offers you this almost ready-made way of doing it, like you say, to mark the passage of time, to explore areas of boundary and uncertainty and anxiety in a ritual way.
Yeah, playfully
Powerful.
deal with our fears
Yeah.
and our hopes, you know, that the year will get through the winter, because in the old times, winter was
you
much more
weren't ever
dangerous,
sure.
and you wouldn't be sure you're going to survive, whether or not you meet a zombie. So just starvation might get you.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have a big feast now, and then you have another big feast, what's now Christmas, midwinter, and you know that structures your hopefully pushing yourself through the year.
But I think also we've come to enjoy a sense of being unsettled and frightened.
Yeah.
That's something that I've looked at is where people actively seek out experiences that are going to maybe creep them out more. And it's almost like an inverse of this valley effect. People are genuinely looking for something that it's kind of Stephen King's three ideas of horror. It's not a gross out, it's not horror, and it's not terror. It's something in that liminal space where you're just not quite comfortable.
It would be really interesting to know if that's and this is going to sound oversimplistic, and it is an oversimplification, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's a connection, if that's a developed world thing, because those absolute existential fears, I might starve to death over the winter, let's be honest, we don't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
But we've evolved and developed, and we're kind of hardwired to look out for things to be afraid of and to address them, aren't we? You can't take the capacity to worry about things out of the human psyche. It's part of what we've evolved to do.
It's almost like we've got a worry load that we need to fill somewhere.
And we don't know what to worry about necessarily. And there's all sorts of messages about that. Like, don't worry about this. If you exercise right and you eat right, then you'll live forever. Don't need to worry about death. But we do need to worry about death.
Yeah.
So we find controlled ways to do it, maybe.
But also, I think that we have a need somewhere to recognise we're not as dominant as we think we are, that humans are not so in charge, that the world is a bit more edgy and difficult.
Things happen
and that
beyond
this
us.
is a time where we playfully at least recognise that things could happen to us.
You go into
and we
those
face that.
wild spaces.
Yeah, and maybe we put ourselves in a position that might culturally be more healthy for us if we didn't keep putting humans and human interests top of the list. And we thought, what's the rest of the world like? Are there things, predators out there? And they're probably much more ordinary than vampires and
But there's
and
dark
zombies,
spaces in the woods that we don't explore and we try to almost forget exist.
See, the rest of the world is carrying on in the hedgerows and in the undergrowth. And
I mean, zombies and vampires notwithstanding, there are plenty of things out there that would eat us if we gave them the chance to do it, aren't there?
There are indeed.
But we don't tend to bother so much about those.
It's
Not
true,
kind
we
of
don't,
culturally,
actually, except for
it's-
sharks.
Everybody hates sharks.
I don't hate sharks, but sharks are the exception. But I'm just thinking also vultures and ravens and sort of carrion things have a very Halloween association, don't they? And they eat
Point,
us.
actually.
Slugs.
That's a primal fear, isn't it? Don't you think? Being eaten.
Of being-
Do you think that's a primal
Maybe
human fear?
it's decomposition. It's all linked
Maybe.
to burial and death.
And we don't like that.
No.
But
the idea
As
of
a
being
society, we don't like that.
There's also messiness, isn't there? There's this stuff
visceral.
that's
Yeah.
just mess. Like, and slugs are kind of archetypally
yes.
horrible, slimy creatures. So we do that kind of playful thing too. Rotting bodies rather than whole bodies. So we like the saints would have been kept pure, and when you dig up their graves,
they don't rot.
They don't rot away. They smell beautiful, but the rest of us get to rot away, and it's all slimy.
But
horrible.
those are things that we would never see in our modern world. In the developed world, they're things we would never see. I mean, even in the last 50 years or so, the likelihood of anyone encountering a dead body, unless they specifically request it, it's got smaller and smaller and smaller.
And I think it gets more shocking when you
Because
haven't
for
had
that
that
reason,
exposure to it.
exactly.
Yeah, you don't lay people out at home anymore.
No.
It's funeral parlours.
No, and you don't even necessarily see them when they are laid out at the funeral parlour.
So again, and we don't go. So Southern Europe and most other places in the world, Halloween, when it's celebrated in its traditional way, would have been a time for people to go to visit the graves. So the Day of the Dead in Mexico, until very
Literally.
recently, was literally about honouring the dead in the graveyards. And then now they've learned in Mexico, Day of the Dead is also about the sort of Halloween spooky traditions.
And the performative
they've learned
stuff,
to play that kind of fearful game, which is kind of rather weird. I mean, I think they are also still visiting the graveyards, but we don't do that, let alone lay the body out.
But there is a not life enhancing exactly, but there's the association between sex and death, for example. This person's dead, but I'm still alive thing. That's
incredibly powerful.
That's very
isn't it?
inbuilt,
Yeah.
I think.
Well, I don't know if I
into
should
the-
mention there are these funeral catalogues where you can buy coffins. I'm now mentioning it.
You are.
Buy coffins.
So whether or not
And
you
they're
should, doesn't
advertised
matter really.
with calendars with ladies with very few clothes on. And you think, okay, if you want
Oh, that's
the
unusual.
classic
Yeah.
sex and death
Yeah, I mean, that's
together.
taking it very literally, isn't it? But
Very
I'm sure
literally.
Freud would have approved.
I'm sure you would. It would be very good. So,
Well, I can see time's getting on. It's coming close to midnight, so we ought to be drawing our Halloween conversations to a bit of a close.
well, that's
That's
been
been
good.
fascinating.
Yeah, thanks.
To your good health.
Cheers.
And no
Nice.
zombies.
Cheers.
Be careful out there.